Thank you for being here, Nathaniel. Nathaniel, I know we met a few years ago. I was remembering that I think it was a Cisco conference or one of
Hmm.
those technology conferences, and I came up to you. And so since then, we contact over the years. So I'm grateful that you're on the show today. And this is the show where we get to highlight who are doing great things and also allow their story to be a light, what we call a beacon, others who may be coming up as well. All right. Sure.
All right. Wow. Okay. Yeah. First, let me say, thank you. It's an honor. It's an honor to be here. Um, I'm, I'm a bit uncomfortable with the people doing great things. I'm just doing what I can, but I am, totally cool with sharing my story. If it helps someone else, then hey, that's what's up.
Good deal. So tell me, first, I just want to go through it. How did you get into technology? How did you get into this tech world?
Yeah, it started when I was a little kid. My mom came home one day with a Commodore VIC 20, and my dad was like, "What's
Mm,
that?" And she's like, "It's a computer." He's like, "Who's it for?" She's like, she points over at me, and like, "Okay, sure." So, it took me a little while to get into it. I had to up my reading comprehension a bit because back in the day, you just get this big book of commands, and it
right.
was mostly stuff in BASIC. And so it's like, okay, this is what we're doing. And then I would, follow along. And yeah, kind of been doing that ever since.
Good. All right. Cool. So I remember actually my sister, he come home with a Commodore 64.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, his job given him this computer at work, so he would bring it home sometimes, and so that was my into the computer that it's a tech. I think that was what piqued my interest in it.
Oh, I
So
totally get it. The 64 was a great machine. So I got my 64 in like middle school. And so
uh,
I could, there was another buddy of mine. He had one, and then maybe some of the other kids had them. And so we had like this little Commodore 64 club, and
really,
yeah, I mean, but it was mainly a game playing, game sharing club.
uh,
Uh, I was really into football then, and my buddies were too. So we had this 10-yard fight game, and we were trying to build the rosters up for our favorite teams, and it kind of pushed us to do other things and to learn more stuff about them. We would get like the Commodore magazines and Family and Home Office Computer and whatever, just to figure out how to do things bigger, better, faster, right? You kind of get on that treadmill with your machine.
yeah.
And so it goes to, hey, one day I've got a tape drive, then I have a 5.25 inch drive, then maybe I step up and get that 3.5. And, you're doing all these little things, right? And then you're like, okay, well, hey, how can we play without having to be over each other's house? Oh, we should both get modems. Cool. So then we get modems and we try to figure this stuff out. And it was just an interesting little time, right? It was like, it was just a good time to discover stuff. We were kids, we had time on our hands, and it was something that we could, just kind of geek out on.
So then, when you were speaking, right, it reminded me of the fact that I've been talking to my wife recently about experiential learning, right? And sometimes when they think about computers and they think about technology, sometimes it's intimidating. You know,
Hmm.
you shared that, hey, look, when you're first raised, just like many of us, is through the game world, right? Through
Hmm.
just enjoying enjoying it. You don't think about the technology, or you don't really think about all that stuff. So,
Hmm.
which is a great point. So, tell me then, after school, what kind of led you to look as when you were going into college, or
Hmm.
even when you're out of college? What kind of directed your path then?
Okay, so going through school, it was kind of early days of computers. There weren't a lot of like computer science kind of courses. Everything was really based around programming. And so, like one of my first computer classes I took in high school was like typing, you know, or something along those lines. But then by
Yeah.
the end, it was AP computer science, right? So then, we're learning stuff. We're learning object-oriented programming, some basic ideas and concepts around it. We're trying to get our logic together, and we're looking at things at a different layer. And so, fast forward, I go to college, and it was all programming. That's what computer science was in college at that time. And I just realized I didn't want to program. Like
Mm.
I didn't want to do it to earn a paycheck, right? I
Yeah.
didn't want to do it and have to like survive on it, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
you know. And I just didn't have that passion for it. And I wish I had, because I could see classmates and peers who were doing all this stuff back in the day. Like fractals were a big deal, so they were making these fractal programs and demos and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, cool, yeah, it's an equation and it's drawing cool stuff. It didn't I didn't feel it in my heart. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I stopped pursuing it in school. I actually wound up leaving school for a bit. I got a job at a software store of all places, and this was around the time of Windows 95. And man, that was neat because it was a really intimate store. This wasn't like the big super box stores now where you got like, aisles and aisles and aisles. It was just a small little store. Customers would come in, and you had a really cool, intimate relationship with them, right? You could have these one-on-one conversations about what it is that we're trying to accomplish,
Yeah.
and then we could make our recommendations. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was sort of like the beginning of being like a business analyst or something like that. I'm taking in the requirements, and
Yeah.
I'm formulating solutions, and we're leading people to the right spot. The other thing that it gave me, which was really neat, was uh, just working with the public and figuring out how to find enough of the internal energy to speak to people in public, because that's normally not me, right? So I could at least say, hey, for my job role, this is what I do. Cool, I'm on. And yeah, it was really cool. So it was interesting because we wouldn't just do the normal software. As things went on, I started looking at the business software, and I would get into the networking stuff. They sold these little kits, and I forget the name of the manufacturer, but what it was two Ethernet cards, right? Two
Yeah.
NICs, and coax cable, and some of them actually had the RJ45, and and you could just drop them in machines, and it came with a copy of Windows for Workgroups, so that's like 3.11, and it was like, oh, all right, well, if I drop this one in here and drop this one here, run this cable, load up a networking stack, and then like, oh, snap, they talk, right? It's this feeling of accomplishment. It's like this, I can, I dig this. This feels
Yeah.
good, and so I go back to the store, and and now I'm talking to customers who are like, hey, how do I hook up a printer in the office? I'm like, oh, cool. Well, you get one of these and do this and this, and it just kind of grew, right? Now I'm kind of an enterprise software guy. Being at the store gave me access to cheap software because I was an employee. We could get free eval copies of most stuff, and it also gave me really cheap access to books and free magazines, so I
Mm.
could dive deep into whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was it, man. That kind of really fueled the fire. And then I was asked, hey, you ever thought about being sysadmin. I'm like, well, not really, but yeah, let's see what that's about. And that's what I've been doing ever since. I've just been moving up the ranks.
So did you go to college? Did you go to 2 year school? Did you go to technical?
I So the funny thing is, I would drop back in every so often, right? Because there's this, oh, hey, you got to have a degree in order to make it in life,
Right.
and I'm working and I'm trying to go to school. Sometimes I would click with the classes. Sometimes I wouldn't.
Mhm.
But I kind of got to a point in my career where I then started doing certifications,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the certification train was really seductive because I I realized I could read a book in a couple of weeks, take a test, and be done, right? Versus,
Yeah.
oh, I've got to take this class for 3 months, and then maybe I'm done, right?
Yeah. And take other classes that might not even be related. Right.
Yeah, you're taking everything. You're taking stuff that it makes you better as an all-around person, but
Yeah.
it's questionable whether or not it gets you paid. So,
Yeah.
but I could see the immediate return on that investment with the certifications. And so
Yeah.
once I started hitting that, and you pass the first one, and there's like an adrenaline jolt from it, you're feeling good, and man, I just kept doing that. Now, uh, I still wasn't making a ton of money, right? Some would say I wasn't making that much money. Those
Right.
early days, I was still living with my mom. Truth be told,
Right.
but you could, but that desire was there, and I knew that it was going to take me someplace. Um, there was this whole era where on the radio there would be these commercials like become an MCSE and make some ridiculous amount of money, right? Something obscene. And
Yeah.
so I was saying to myself, well, okay, let's do that. I look into the price of those courses. I'm like, oof, I can't do that, but I could go to the bookstore and I could read. I had access to computers. I had access to software from work, so
Yeah.
I could get copies of stuff and I could try things out. You
You
know?
know, I like what you're saying. The truth is, a lot of people are actually preaching that story now, but
Mm-hmm.
you actually started this, 15, I'm not even sure how many years ago, many years,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
such an important one that I'm glad I'm getting to talk to you because now someone can see someone who's been in the game like 15 to 20 years who actually started from the search, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who said, look, I can shift the way that my career goes. I don't have to go the traditional 2 year school or 4 year university in order to get into a field that's considered to be technical and educated. I mean, education is about you learning and you
Yeah.
being able to get that knowledge and make use of that knowledge. You were able to do that via certification. I thought that was
I
great.
was. I was, but there is a certain element of who you know and timing and things like that.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I had access to people, in office situations from, working in the software store because we were
yeah,
right there on M Street in DC. And so we had all these office buildings and people would come in and, and I could talk to them. And then, that's how relationships were formed.
yeah.
Uh, I don't know if I would have been able to get a job just with a flat, hey, let me send the resume out kind of deal.
Yeah.
Um, I got up to a point where I did do that, and that was kind of cool. Uh, and then it just kind of grew. And then there's another part of me that's like super competitive, and so and back when I was young, I really you couldn't tell me nothing. So uh, there would be these folks who would come in and they had all the certs and they were young, they were like my age, and they're not treated the same, right? I could
Mhm.
tell that there was a different level there, but I could also tell, like, I don't know if they had the passion for it,
Uh,
right? You
yeah,
know, and sure they knew some stuff, but when I realized, I know I know about as much as they do. It it bugged me a little bit. And and so yeah, I just kept pushing, kept taking tests, kept certain, uh, and I kept learning about different things, you know, um, and I would just tinker. So I tell you this: I worked as a sysadmin for a company. Um, that company was selling like really big systems to different setups. They were like old deck systems.
Mhm.
Well, the bottom fell out of that market, and they let a few of us go. I was the young guy who was supposed to be there for Windows, and so at that point there hadn't been a full shift. So last one in, first one out. So I go looking for another job. I'm thinking I should be able to pick up as another sysadmin. I'd taken and passed a few of the MCSE court tests along that path, and I could not get a job as an admin.
Yeah.
I wound up working for a company, and they had me doing Windows 95 installs, which was really kind of interesting. And again, it felt a little bit like an insult because they bring us in, they're interviewing us, they're talking to us about different things, and some folks get to do at least help desk, right? They're out there solving problems. And then, they just took a group of us and they're like, all right, here, you're going to use Ghost, and you're going to ghost Windows 95 onto these machines.
Mm.
And it was neat because it was a hotel chain in the area, and they were going through migrations.
Yeah.
And so what we wound up doing is, and this is that tinkering and that, hey, what can we do? I'm sitting there with my friends, who I'm working with, and we're like, you know what? We don't really have to do this way. And I looked at we had a sheet that had all the little things we were supposed to look for. Oh, you got to get their Lotus Notes files. You got to get their full files out of this thing and here, and then you copy them over to here and here. And I was like, yeah, how about we just automate that? All right, let's just boom. And so we did that. We started automating more of the job, and we started becoming more efficient. We started looking at ways to do things, and so our numbers were going up because our efficiency was getting that much better, right? And
Yeah.
people were kind of starting to understand the why they were doing things as well,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Because once you're looking at the automation, if something happens with the automation that doesn't work, you're like, oh crap, all right, cool, I'm going to check this, and all right, yeah, and I know I need this file in order for your Lotus Notes to come back, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to automate both sides of it, the copying of the data off, their personal data, getting it back in there, doing some verification steps. And what was interesting is that over time, our group sort of became like known as a not a think tank, but people would come to us asking us technical questions, right? And like the help desk guys would come and say, "Hey, what about this or that?" And it went from this thing where it felt like we were at, where we were just seen as hands, you know, maybe smart hands,
Yeah.
you know, and now we were able to make that a position that did more than expected.
Yeah.
And I think that was really neat for all the folks involved, and
That's
all of the
great.
group.
Yeah, I can see that being a big boost because now you come in at one and you realize, hey, if I can add value this way, now I went from, like you just said, just to kind of like subject matter experts, where initially tier one would have been good to get into help desk. Now the tier one folks are even treating you guys like if you're a tier three support or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty cool. So tell me now how now you are a product manager, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
tell me about that, a day in the life of the product manager, and maybe you could relate it to, and I think you started to do that, relate it to some of the things you learned in the past to help you do that job pretty well.
Yeah. Okay. So, product manager. I am specifically an outbound product manager,
Okay.
and that's kind of it's a little bit of a different gig, right, than your standard product manager. The standard product manager will understand their space and talk to their engineers and bring ideas in terms of different products and features and guiding that product. As an outbound product manager, I talk to, as it says, kind of outbound folks, customers, analysts, folks in the industry, try to understand what it is that that product is, understand the greater context in which that product lives, and then bring that kind of an idea focus back to the product team, right? Like, hey, here's some of the other things that are happening in the space. Maybe these are some ideas for future product ideas that can, keep us moving in the same trajectory, or this is how maybe we can differentiate our offering. And I've been super lucky that the folks, everyone who I've worked with on my team as other OPMs, and all of the PMs who I've worked with, they all work without ego, and we're all just there trying to figure out what's going to really make this thing better. We use a lot of data. This was something that I learned when I got here. Was just how much effort folks put into these things. We have UX teams, we have UR teams, essentially folks who understand the user experience. And we do lots of research. We talk to customers, and sometimes there's surveys or all kinds of little questions and things that we gather, and it's like, hey, would you like this or this? Would this feature be more helpful to you, or would this other feature? Right? And so as we're kind of moving through and we're making things happen, we know that there's a purpose behind it. It's actually moving with intent, instead of just kind of taking a dart and throwing it at the dartboard, right? It's, hey, I know that if we deliver this feature, we can now talk to these folks in a different way than we were before.
Okay. So
yeah.
So it sounds like what you're saying is, from a product manager standpoint, your position starts more with understanding the customer or and industry, what that tool is going to use. Once speaking to them and getting that feedback, you're then able to bring that in and utilize that within that product. So it's still customer first. It's product manager, but it's still what you're doing back at that store, where you're listening to that customer, understanding requirements, understanding the things, the need that they want. Now we can come back into Google and say, okay, here's some of the things that we need to put together, because we know that's impact, because we just heard it from the customers themselves.
Exactly. We heard it with the customer themselves. Our research backs this up. All right, cool. We're going to zig instead of zag. And that's really cool. And so then there's this other aspect of my job where I'm not just taking the lessons from the outside and bringing them in, but I'm also, once we have created these features, then it's going back out and letting folks know what the value of that feature is. To those who didn't get who weren't as part of those surveys initially, right? You didn't have to just, kind of be a champion for it. And we have other champions within the company as well, right? We have marketing, we have DevRel, we have all kinds of folks. But the OPM's role is a little bit different, because we do have those customer relationships, so we can continue to gather feedback on that item after it's launched, so we can see how well did it land. How are customers really receiving it now that it's out there? Is it, essentially, did it hit the mark? And then we can also get feelings for that by talking to industry analysts. Hey, how do we compare with some of the other folks out there? What are they doing that maybe what are some of the trends? How do we? It's a neat way to kind of validate where we are.
Okay.
So, yeah, and it's a neat job, one that I really didn't even know existed.
And there's so many jobs like that, because as I listen to you talk, I keep thinking about those who will be listening to this, right? And when people think technology and technical, I think, like I shared before, they're usually intimidated. But what I hear you speaking to is how do you communicate with customers? How do you listen well, right? How do you translate what might be pain into something that could be a solution, right?
Mhm.
How do you gather information and then able to, like that research that you mentioned, and make that useful to you? A lot of those are skills in themselves,
Mhm.
and it's not necessarily you learning calculus.
Right. And don't get me wrong. There's still other skills that you're going to bring to the table, right? You need to understand
Yeah,
some of the tech skills to say, all right, well, this is a small, medium, large problem that we need to solve. You understand that it's not just magic, right? And you're definitely going to want to be a little have that technical background so that you can test these features yourself, so you can talk about them, so that you can do demos. But then there's another aspect of it as well. It's not just kind of talking to the customers and hearing them, but uh, bringing some sense of how business operates, right? What would this feature or product mean to a business?
hmm
It's not enough to just release something that's cool. It has to be something that brings value to people. And so, you understand who are the personas that product is targeted toward. You
yeah,
learn how to describe the product based on who's in the room, because a C-level executive is going to want to hear something that's, their concerns are different than a network admin whose concerns are different from a developer or whoever. So, hopefully you have a product that talks to all three, um, and you're able to make your message resonate with everyone.
yeah,
And you're able to articulate to them again what that value is. Is it going to make them faster? Is it going to make them is it going to reduce error? Does it, how does it relate to their velocity? Does it mean they're able to try features faster? Like in the case of some of the CI/CD products that we have,
yeah,
there are all sorts of little things like that you kind of want to be cognizant of. Oh, and also from the business standpoint, you do also want to understand like the addressable market, you know, because sometimes what you want to do is say is this a fight we need to fight?
mm,
Do we need a product to do this? Uh, I, I love my team because uh, we're allowed to ask questions that are like completely basic, but hit different.
mm,
I'll give you an example of this. Earlier this week, someone asked the question, so is this really a solution or is it a product?
mm.
You
So,
know?
is it really a solution? Meaning, can it be a feature to what we have, or is this a separate product? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Or like, is this just pulling together different products, packaging them in such a way that they can do this thing? Or is this really a unique standalone offering?
Yeah,
How should this be viewed? And just kind of going through like basic stuff like that.
yeah,
How is this? Is this thing something that we should pursue? What's the best way to pursue it? Uh, those are really cool questions, and I'm lucky enough to have really smart people around me who I can bounce this stuff off of. Because it's not these things aren't always obvious.
right. So tell me, switching back a bit. So, if you look over your career, then, right? Uh, what would you consider to be your biggest career highlight, or yeah, what would be? Let's start there. We're going to talk about your
Hmm,
career, about your career
man.
highlight. Ask you about who kind of made the biggest impact on you. So let's start with that. What's your biggest career highlight? You say.
Oh, okay. Oh man, there are a couple. And I don't really think of them as highlights so much as
Well, I
the
just want to hear.
folks who I was around who made it special, right?
Yeah.
So there are two times back when I kind of first started doing stuff like that Windows 95 team. Love those
Mhm.
guys. Love them to this day. Um, Later on in life, I started doing government contract work, and I worked with a bunch of folks over at Department of Transportation, and I was there for a while, and I would say I kind of grew up there in a lot of ways, right? It's where my young adulthood was spent,
Yeah.
and again made some great friendships there. I had people there who were really pushing me, and asking me to think about things differently. I had folks who would say, "Hey, great, you're looking at it at this application level, but what is what about the big picture? The big picture being the network, the storage, everything else along the way. How are
Mm,
we going to maintain our SLAs? Where are our single points of failure? Um, just all that sort of thing, right? What kind of response time should each of the components have in order for us to meet the true customer need? And that's some really cool stuff. It was heady stuff and stuff, and honestly, it was a lesson I needed at that time. Uh,
mm,
I don't know if I would have been as receptive to it or as capable of dealing with those questions earlier in my career, but when they hit at that time, it was magic, and it's something that has stuck with me to this day.
yeah.
Um, I've been lucky enough to do all kinds of crazy things. I've done data center moves. I've stood up new offices, I've done all kinds of crazy stuff. Um, and each time, each job, I've learned something new. Um, I would say that if I had some advice for folks in that way, it's try different things. I was sysadmin. I was a network admin. I did virtualization. I was a DBA at one point. I did all these different things, right? Like one of those kind of T-shaped resources. I kind of knew enough about stuff, and then I could go really deep on some other things when necessary. And
Yeah.
because of that, at first there used to be a joke like, "Oh, hey, you're a jack of all trades," right? And that used to be a slam. Uh, but in today's world, it's actually kind of a plus,
Yeah.
to actually know a little bit about all these things and to understand their interconnections, so that you're able to kind of see that bigger picture, understand where this thing that you're doing fits into that role, and then you can start asking the questions of whether or not you're doing the right thing.
Okay.
That's huge.
Over your career, especially in your path, have you ever felt like you had imposter syndrome?
Yes,
And you did.
every
How do
day,
you know that? You said every day.
every day. Wake up with it every day. It's like in the Avengers. Hey, you need to suit up. What's your secret? I'm always angry. Well, I always have imposter syndrome. It's just it never really leaves me. Now there are times when all that said, I do continue to get up every day. I still continue to do my job. I still continue to put out effort and try. Right. I do believe that every day is a day to hopefully do something better than the day before. Um, and so, yeah, some of it comes from knowing and having an acceptance of myself and knowing what I don't know. Now, the
Mhm.
flip side of that is I'm maybe sometimes assuming other people know far more than me. And then that creates an inequality. And so I'm like, hey, I shouldn't even be here. Right. Um,
Right.
and yeah, I mean, look, I work at probably one of the worst places for a person with imposter syndrome. Um, these people really are different. Um, there is a thought process here that's amazing. You can have really deep conversations with folks. And what I wasn't prepared for, though, was how open people were here to having conversations.
Mhm.
Um, almost everyone's approachable. You know, I can look through the local directory and go, oh crap, this person's here. Or I tell you what, I was reading through one of the local use groups, right? Our internal group chat deals, and was reading, and there was this discussion going on about our topic. I think it was like accessibility or something. And I'm reading it like, wow, this is really cool stuff. I wonder who did this. I look up and it's like Vint Cerf. And it's like, holy crap, you know? And so, having those people around and seeing kind of how they put things together, not just, the huge things that they've done to enable our industry, but then the things that they continue to do just to make the world better, in the realm that they have.
Right.
It's cool, man. You know, yeah.
So when you think now your mom would say, your parents, especially since she was one of the first person who brought home that computer, right? Um, what are they saying? What are your parents saying about you? How they feel about your trajectory? Since that time.
Oh, my mom wants her check. That's what she wants.
Show me the money.
Yeah, where's your cut? um, but seriously, yeah, she's pretty. I think she's cool with it. I think she's cool with it. Um, I don't know if she fully gets what I do. I think she had kind of a different plan for me.
Okay.
Um, you know, a lot of my family, I think, had different plans for me. But this is the life, right? And a lot of my other family wound up going into tech as well. So
Okay.
I think that it just was one of those things that worked out well. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I do think about the path less taken, right? Um, I told the story to my wife one day, to my wife, my youngest. Because we were just talking about like, hey, what do you want to do when you were a kid? I was like, I wanted to be a paleontologist. I really did want to be a paleontologist, right? And my mom at the time said, by the time you grow up, you'll probably have found everything. And I sat there and I thought about it. I was like, man, yeah, I guess there is a limit to some jobs. Now, of course,
Uh,
Jurassic Park happens. We're still finding stuff every day. I realized
yeah.
that was not actually true. But yeah, it's kind of interesting some of the advice and some of the things that you hear over time and like how it can zig or zag. But yeah, I I could be doing something different. I could have been Alan Grant.
So, um, so tell me, I'm going to ask was there a job that was kind of like your worst job or
Mhm. Oh
so?
yeah. I've been. I mean, I'm not proud of it, but yeah, I've been terminated. Not every job works for everyone. Not everything is going to click. Um,
Well, but your jobs weren't all in the tech. I mean, like it could be that you worked at, I don't know, a restaurant or, you know, like for me,
I
I worked one time. I actually picked trash up off the highway in New York. That was one of the jobs during the summer. So I'm just wondering, is there any type of job that you go, because for me, jobs that I don't like also help clear the way and direct me to jobs that I do like. So I'm just
yeah.
wondering. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the funny thing about my career. Um, I've only had one job that wasn't related to tech,
Uh,
um, and it was when I was in school. I was at Maryland, and I was selling. I wasn't even selling windows. I was selling appointments to get window salesmen to a house. And I would walk around with the canvassing crew, go door to door, and be like, knock, knock, knock. Hey, I don't know if you've seen our trucks in the area, but we're working, down the street with Mr. Jones. And,
yeah.
while we're here, we're giving out free estimates. What's the best day for me to come out and give you yours? And that's what I had to do, door after door after door. And this was after class, right? So this is, kind of as the evening's coming on, we're doing all this, and we're driving around to different neighborhoods, trying to figure out which neighborhoods you haven't canvassed before. That was the only job I had that was not in tech, and it was interesting because now looking back on it, one of the managers there, he looks at me, he's like, "Why are you doing this?" I was like, "I don't know, it's money. I needed money. And money comes with jobs. And so yeah, that was the only time uh, I ever did something non-tech, and every job I've had since then has been in this field in some way. And so, yeah, I've had experiences in this field which have said, all right, well, maybe I don't want to do this, but I want to do that. Hey, maybe network administration isn't for me. Let me try my hand at being a DBA. Oh, hey, maybe being a DBA isn't a thing. I've been around long enough. People have asked me to do management. I've tried management, and I realized that's not me, right? You
Yeah.
know, and I am super thankful for every opportunity I've ever gotten from for everyone who's ever believed in me and said, "Hey, I think you should try these things. Try doing this or that." Because really, it's given me the perspective that I have now, where it's like, yeah, I'd rather be an individual contributor right now. I don't I don't think that my best destiny is leading a team. Maybe I can influence a team, and that's kind of what I'm doing now by saying, hey, here are some ideas that I think would help make this product better. But you know, doing the full time management deal is not. I didn't find it fulfilling.
I'm going to kind of swing your brain a little bit. So you mentioned that, but if you were going to speak then to your 15-year-old self,
Mm-hmm.
knowing where you are now, knowing where maybe the industry is, etc., things that you've gone through, if we're going to go back to your 15-year-old self, what one or two pieces of advice would you give yourself? And I'll give it a second question.
All right. Looking back at 15-year-old me, I would say learn binary sort, like really, really learn it. Back in the day, that's what we were practicing. I don't know how many times those damn sorting algorithms would trip me up, and which is the most efficient under which circumstances. I mean, like, dude, just spend more time thinking about that. Maybe a little
Learn
less
binary
time.
sort.
Yeah, right. You know, um, you know, but everything kind of happens for a reason. And
Yeah.
other than that, um, stay patient.
Mm.
It will happen if you stay consistent and you stay patient. You can achieve things. When I was younger, I realized how impatient I was, how entitled I thought I was, or how entitled I was acting. Right? I can look back on it and see it's like, okay, dude, so you're a rock star at a company for like 6 months. No, you're not entitled to a promotion, right? It's stuff like that, right? But I think back to when I was a kid, and it seemed like time was so slow. And so, yeah, spending 6 months, 8 months, a whole year somewhere, like, come on, I've been killing it for a year. And, over the course of your career, that's a drop in a bucket. It's like, great, but, we
Yeah.
need you need to do this longer. So I would just say patience. It'll come. Yeah.
So the other question I have, especially more towards, I guess, tech, you're a system engineer, you did some network engineering, you're a solution architect, now you're a product manager. So you have spent a career, and even before that, working at the tech store. You spent a career, a lifetime of listening to people, building requirements, etc. When we look forward, what are some of the technology spaces that you are most excited about or interested in?
Yeah. So I do think that we're still in early stages of AI and machine learning, and that I could see having some huge impacts. You're starting to see a little bit now in the coding space where there are these like AI assistants that can help you flesh out your code. We have lots of low code platforms out there. We have cloud engineer. We have the cloud, which allows people to try new ideas quickly, right? Imagine a time back when someone wanted to start a business, let's say in the early aughts. They might have had to buy a whole bunch of servers, load up a bunch of stuff, fire it up, and be unclear about whether or not they were going to have a product that lands. Now,
Yeah.
you have an idea, you can spin it up on the cloud, see what happens, right? You make magic or you don't, and then you're able to fail faster and move on and pivot. So I see all of these things kind of coming together, right? The ability to create quickly and pivot quickly, artificial intelligence and ML, and these platforms that are just really, really awesome at being able to stitch things together and abstract more and more things from you, right? Um, Not having to worry necessarily about uh, the database underneath, right? When we get to that point, that's huge. Knowing that your investment, your infrastructure, your application will work no matter where it is in the world, no matter what kind of fault happens in a region. When those things become, and they're becoming there, they're getting there now. They're becoming more and more common to more and more businesses, and they're becoming more and more affordable to more and more businesses. That's when creativity gets unleashed, and that's when really cool things start to happen, right? When you allow people to do what they do, to be creative. There are a lot of creative folks out there who would be making great things, but the understanding of the computer itself is a thing that was maybe holding them back,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you lower those barriers to entry, you bring more of those people in, you get more folks um, who could just help people, right? The more folks we connect, the more opportunities we have for folks to be helped, and that's really kind of where this goes, you know. And then of course all the other stuff happens too, right? You find ways to monetize things that maybe you didn't understand before or whatever, but you know, there are multiple levels of success that are possible, and that's where the future is going. We're making it easier for more and more folks to express themselves with technology, and that's really the thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to use technology to help benefit folks.
Yeah. I like that statement. Uh, Helping folks express themselves through technology. It's a really powerful statement. Like that. All right. So just a couple of questions here as we wind down. This conversation has been great. Um, so tell me about, what do you do on your off time? You mentioned your wife, kids. What are some of the other things that you do to kind of balance or have that, what Jeff Bezos would say, work-life harmony?
um, Work-life harmony. Um, I have only had this job for a few months, like 7 months, 7, 8 months. So I'm still learning a lot, and there's a lot to learn. The folks around me say that it's like a fire hose, and it never stops. So sometimes you can just kind of stand out the way, and then you figure out when to jump back in. So I'm still doing a lot of reading. I'm still trying to understand how different pieces fit together. There are a lot of different market stuff that I'm also trying to figure out as well, right? Because now I'm thinking about these products on a level where I didn't necessarily have to before. But when I do start to unwind, I love football. I'm a huge Washington Commanders fan, have been since birth. It's both a blessing and a curse. And so yeah, the NFL gets my time, NBA sometimes, so sports, uh, video games. Sometimes I get a chance to play them. You know, um, I put some time into, of course, Madden. That's been with me since forever. And Yeah, that's kind of it. And then hang out with my family. We see movies. We're a big movie house. TV shows. We do this thing every Wednesday or Thursday, depending on when the schedule works out, where we do like a Disney night. So my oldest comes over,
Yeah.
and whatever the new hot show is on Disney Plus is what we watch that night. And we all know that
Oh,
in the
cool.
middle of the week we can get together, chill for a little bit, talk, laugh about something, and then that kind of gets you over the hump till the weekend when everybody regroups. Yeah, so that's it.
I like it.
Mhm.
Really cool. Purposeful family time. You know, so that's great.
Yeah, yeah, and that is the other thing. I know I spent a lot of time away from family trying to build my career. Up to this point, I missed a lot of stuff. Um, and in fact, my wife still kind of jokes at times that I can be present and not present at the same time. So that's a thing. I have to own it, and I would encourage um, folks who are going into this to stay hungry. Definitely do you. Be ambitious. Do what you got to do, but also you may need to force yourself to create balance. Right? Don't expect the world to do it for you. Figure out how you need to make that thing work. And when you are off, try to figure out how to actually be off.
Okay. So one question I have for you here on our show uh, is tagline is meaningful conversations, stronger connections, impactful contributions. So as we end, tell me about how some of the things that you do to contribute to your community, like whether it's volunteering or sharing your information via blog, whatever. What are some of the things that you now?
Yeah, that's kind of wild. It used to be the blog. I was an avid blogger, which I'm a huge advocate of. Right, if you're in this business, blog. Some folks say it's learning out in the open. Do that, right? I think the kids today, maybe they don't blog as much. Maybe they do like Twitter Spaces, or they do what's that other deal? They do they may do through live video, right? They do some kind of live
So
video streaming
TikTok.
where they oh yeah, some of them, yeah, I guess TikTok's a thing, but Twitch, like those live Twitch
Oh,
sessions,
okay.
right? Where it's like, hey, code with me. I've seen some really interesting stuff there, right? Like live coding sessions where someone says, I want to learn X today, let me try it. And
Wow.
yeah, it's some really powerful stuff, right? And that's community driven because you got the chat open and people can kind of shoot out ideas. So I would totally encourage anyone who's young, who's in the space, do that stuff. That's one way you can also be seen and make connections, and that can also help influence how things work in your career. But what do I do now? Mostly is Twitter. Probably that's the one thing I do now. It's a little more consistent,
Mhm.
because I can use it for fun and say some goofy things. I can complain about my Washington Commanders, or cheer them on sometimes.
I
Um,
heard they want to be sold. That was the
yeah,
step.
yeah. Which that's a whole thing. It would be great, but I won't believe it till I see it, because it could also
Yeah,
go
yeah, yeah.
horribly in that uh, he doesn't sell the whole team, but he only sells a part ownership of the team, just to kind of stay in it, and that's not what we want. Um, there are a whole bunch of other political local things about it, like are we going to get a new stadium? Is the team going to stay in PG County? It's a whole mess, right? It's Washington politics with the thing that we love most, which is the football team. Yeah, I know the Nationals are here, and yeah, respect, but it's a football town, right?
Yeah.
That's what we do. That's what brings everyone together in this town. It's when the Commanders are winning. Again, all respect to the Washington Caps and and the other teams, but
Yeah.
my generation, that's what it is.
what as we finish here, what would be is there a book or a even a podcast, might even be a video, a YouTube channel? Before I just ask about the book, but is there a particular place or that you would want to send people to read or listen to that you think is very, would be
Yeah.
very valuable?
Yeah. So what I find that the book, The Phoenix Project, is super helpful.
The
It's
Phoenix Project.
yeah, it's a fiction book, right? And it's essentially the story of a fictional company. They make widgets or whatever, and they have tech issues that they're going through. And for people who've been in space, it starts to hit real close to home at times. It has fairly stereotypical types of folks, in different roles, and you see them on a journey, right, where everything's a mess. Things start to get a little better. They hit a setback, and then, now they're able to work and deliver products faster. And it doesn't shy away from a lot of other topics that, again, kind of hit home. That book has a follow up called The Unicorn Project. That
Mm-hmm.
one's also pretty good. That one's more of a developer side story that takes place in the same universe, the same company. So I typically recommend folks kind of go through those because no matter what your role is, you kind of then get a glimpse into the lives of these other folks, and then that might also help you say, "Hey, that's what this other person's um, journey is. That's what their struggle is," and you can find some empathy in that. Um,
Uh,
and so, yeah, I start with those two, and then if those two help are working for you, you can go deeper into stuff. You can go to like the real world versions of these things. You can read Accelerate, which is a really good book about some of the DevOps and Agile practices that we're trying to get off the ground today that a lot of businesses are implementing. Uh, in terms of podcasts, um, I would say check out check out a couple. The first podcast that comes to mind is Ned's podcast called Day Two Cloud. Um, it's a really good one. Um, the Imposter Syndrome Network, they're
oh, there's that.
yeah, that they're great. They're great. And I would also say look up Tech Field Day. Now,
Oh, yeah, that feels
yeah,
really good. Yeah,
yeah. It's a lot of neat stuff. A lot of folks being real and asking real questions about the tech, right?
yeah.
And that's what we should be doing. We should be interrogating this stuff. We should be trying to figure out if it really solves a problem. That's the only reason why we make it. At least it should be the only reason we make it. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. That's it. I really appreciate this time. The conversation has been very, very interesting, and it's good to hear a little bit more about your story and your path. As I thought it would be helpful to others who hear it. I'm sure it will be some really good insight. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
Good deal.